Hello, I was recently fortunate enough to present at the Databricks Data and AI Summit. I was unable to have that recorded there because of the way that the facilities were set up. So I thought I would re-record it here, trying to capture some of the essence of what I presented. So jumping straight in, the topic is sensitive data approaches, and in particular using generative AI and other Databricks workloads to manage sensitive data. So first of all, a little bit about myself. My name is Dr. Alan Dennis. I am a member of Avanad's Global Integrated Center of Excellence, the ICOE. I'm also a Databricks champion, and as you can tell, very passionate about Databricks. I hold a doctorate in computer science. My concentration was in big data analytics. I'm also an instructor at the University of Convalence, where I teach AI classes. Also, through Speedboat Professional Services, I teach Databricks classes as well. My wife and I live on a 74-acre farm in southeast Ohio. I recently wrote a book on lake houses, in particular the Databricks Lake House Platform Cookbook. The barcode here will take you to my LinkedIn profile. Feel free to connect. The barcode here will take you to the Amazon page for my book. Here's a little cuteness for you from the farm. Some of this year's babies. Bottom left is a beautiful white goat or white sheep with her mom. Then some baby goats playing in the middle at the top. In the bottom is a new bull calf we have hanging out with his dad, who looks like he needs a bath, as most farm animals generally do. So anyway, the purpose of this talk and of the corresponding white paper that this is about is to talk you about the common approaches of dealing with Databricks, within Databricks, dealing with sensitive data. And in particular, kind of providing an overview of the problem, talk about the challenges of using synthetic data, which is one approach to solving this problem, and also provide some definitions for use in the context so that there's less ambiguity. Additionally, we want something to be reproducible and so that when you're dealing with sensitive data, such as in the healthcare industry and inside of an environment such as Azure Databricks, that it's not a one-off experience every time, that there is a standard way of at least talking about it, if not doing it. So the white paper covers the topics you see here. It reads like a clock, going from challenges with sensitive data to definitions and so on. That's a lot of stuff, right? And it's a pretty big white paper. I recommend you take a look. I've included a post with that link before, I believe. If not, I'll include it again. Take a look. Let me know what you think. We're going to talk about the stuff that's circled, right? So challenges with sensitive data, definitions, solutions, and then a recommendation. Jumping right in, what are the challenges with sensitive data? Well, the short answer is you don't want to mess it up, right? There are some special architectural and processing approaches and tools that are necessary when you're dealing with this kind of data. In particular, we're talking about things like PII and PHI, right? There's regulatory penalties for failure to have proper controls in place to protect them. And that means that the cost of failure is exceedingly high, something that you want to make sure that you're avoiding. Offshore resources are often attractive in our modern ecosystem. However, there are some challenges utilizing them when you're dealing with sensitive data, and we talk a little bit about ways of dealing with that as well. The common challenges relate to things like HIPAA, so healthcare and life sciences. Higher education has FERPA. And there's various other regulatory bodies in place. California has several laws as well, and not to mention our good old friend GDPR for our European fellows, or anyone dealing with European the citizens of that region. Anyway, so we also have challenges with offshore data. And with data controls, and also dealing with unstructured data, such as a provider's notes, can be quite challenging. Some of the solutions that you'll see that try to address this are things like the three environment approach, sometimes using some sort of leveraging or using a sensitive data protection mechanism, so some form of anonymization and so on. We'll talk about that in depth in a little bit. Maybe you just lock down the environment so that certain people can access certain environments. and there's challenges with that as well. And then there's file or table access controls, generally not much finer grained than that. And sometimes they'll utilize things like clean rooms, which is something Databricks went to the trouble of building to help address this particular problem. In particular, it lets you control who sees what in that environment in a very controlled way that is easily to reverse and so on. So data is who can access it has to be governed and goes through a process and so on. Anyway, the traditional three-tier or three-environment approach that you see here, oftentimes in this case, it uses a metadata-driven ingestion and refinement tool of some sort, such as Avanad's MDMF framework. And that relies upon a data store of some sort, and also so you'll have some place where the metadata is being persisted, some means of turning that into action, oftentimes some sort of a notebook-based approach. You want to get that stuff between environments using DevOps, typically as some sort of a publishing process, and that will push that data into the higher level environments such as QA, and then eventually making it over to production. Oftentimes, data goes through a flow downward from the production environment to the lower level environments, usually with some form of anonymization, maybe sampling as well, so it's a subset, and it may also be some other mechanisms like the sensitive data simply does not go down. Anyway, it's important to talk about these things in clear terms, and that's what definitions are all about. So in the white paper, I used the word actual, and this is data that came from typically what you would think of as a production system. That's an environment, but we oftentimes refer to data that is real data, actual data, as something that is production data. It may contain PII and PHI, so sensitive data. And generally speaking, if something is derived from actual data, it is in turn actual data, even though you may have done some sort of masking or whatever. You want to still think of it as actual data that has transformations been applied to it. Sensitive data is data that is PHI, PII, or highly regulated. It's data that you don't want just anyone accessing. It needs to be controlled. Rather than speaking of the specific types of sensitive data, in the white paper, I speak of all data that is stuff that you don't want to just let loose as sensitive data. And a protection mechanism is a way of handling that sensitive data for compliance reasons, generally speaking. And the goal is to reduce the potential for exposure. There's also re-identification. Sometimes your data is protected in such a way that you can decode it, if you will, get back to the original value. So if you've encrypted it, you can re-identify it by decrypting, provided you have the key. And then column suppression is another solution as well, where you just simply don't include the column in the output, or it's nulled out, or some other way of dealing with it. So when we think about catalogs and environments, and those are very specific words, it's important to break that down. And these are two definitions that are important to understand. An environment is a place where you do something. So it may be a place where you are developing software engineering activities, which are actually data engineering activities, to transform and manipulate data in some fashion. That may occur in a development environment, where quality assurance is an environment where you're attempting to validate the results of the development. Does those processes do what they're supposed to do? System integration test has a purpose as well, make sure everything talks together and so on. Also, data science and AI and ML, that is an environment because that is a type of thing that you're trying to accomplish. So a data science environment is a place where a catalog is utilized to perform some operation, something. And when you're doing development, you're going to be utilizing a catalog. Your catalogs could be actual. They could contain actual data. They may be anonymized, pseudo-anonymized. It may be synthetic. They may actually be a subset of the actual, right? And it's important to think of the things in these terms. A QA catalog could exist, but more likely It is a catalog that is actual, that is a subset of data. So it may actually be a subset of actual data. So it's important to think about the distinction between what you're doing in a certain location versus what the data has had done to it. When we talk about software development environments, generally speaking, there's an ordering to some of these environments, and there's those pesky little data science and AI and ML folks, right, that are outliers to this. Whenever you talk about higher level environments, that's things over here to the right. So production, UAT, SIT, and quality assurance, QA, those are higher environments to development. So it's an ordering is how we naturally think of them. We do so to think of it as being closer to being completed for the purpose of developing software engineering activities, right? That's the point. That's why we have a test and dev and QA and so on, whatever you call them. They exist for some purpose, likely to make sure that your data is correct in production. And we do these things for a particular reason. We also have user groups and catalog access, right? So users belong to groups. That's how you want to do it. So Alan may be a great guy, but you don't necessarily want to give Alan access directly to a particular catalog. Instead, stick Alan in a group of like-minded individuals doing similar work-related activities and make sure that he's able to have his rights governed by his membership in a group, not granted directly. And you'll want to make sure that you nest those groups as needed. And you're going to want to rely on, as we get to it later on, Unity or catalog for your catalogs, and also Azure Active Directory for your identity management. When we talk about data in general, you have kind of a flow chart that you may want to deal with when you're dealing with sensitive data. So whenever you have data coming in and it's got stuff in it that's concerning, one way you could do it is segregate the data. And if you want to do that, you just simply take you may do it at a data set level. All of the data sets that have stuff in them that is sensitive goes into a special place with special access controls. In particular, you're going to put those into a special catalog that has, or schema that has different governance and group membership than the general body of data that it's pulled from. You may treat all sensitive data as the same. You may not break it down in varying severities, or you might go to the trouble of having some sort of classification and splitting up and so on. If you want to preserve the original values, and there's a chance that Unity Catalog can be circumvented, which when you talk about things like Fabric, that's a very real thing, then you want to store stuff encrypted. So any of the columns that contain sensitive values should be encrypted and utilize a column mask function to decrypt the values. And so that could be problematic from a performance perspective. So think long and hard when doing that. If it's never going to be bypassed, you may want to use a column mask function. And that's simply whenever you'd store it in the clear, whenever somebody goes to access it that doesn't have permissions, they see either just stars or null or something that isn't the real value. You may also, if you don't care about preserving the original values, then muck it up before you store it, right? So anonymize it and then serialize it. And so that's the way that you can deal with potentially sensitive data. When we talk about sensitive data protection mechanisms, this kind of speaks to that same thing I just did from a slightly different angle. You basically have pseudo-anonymization. Anonymization is the high-level ways that these are done. And these are kind of the various variations of those things as you break it down. So pseudo-anonymization means you can return it from it's having been applied, so you can get back to the original value, versus anonymization. It's a one-way trip. You don't come back. Data science is its own, data science AI and so on, has its own special sort of activities that they do. And you probably want to give them access to the actual data. You can think of that as production data, likely gold or silver, possibly even bronze, depending upon who they are and how skilled they are in the art. You also likely want to give them their own personal catalog so that they can store interim work in it. And that allows them to have a safe place to do something like decrypt values and work on it. Synthetic data is a common way of addressing this problem, but there's some challenges with synthetic data. When you're dealing with a relational model, it's very challenging to create synthetic data. You have to do it in the right order. Tools will help you with this, but it is something that's potentially challenging. Prediction is almost impossible against and model training against synthetic data unless you've done it in a very special way. You have to have made it based upon some real value. There's Tonic AI is one company that does something similar. So shout out to Tonic. Synthetic data in general can be quite challenging to create. A solution, you may come up with multiple ones, but my solution that I'm proposing here has 3 pillars. Unity Catalog is one of those pillars. Unity Catalog, in my opinion, has been underestimated. It is at least as important as Active Directory or Intra ID to this solution. And so as such, it should be treated with all due respect. It is a significant body of knowledge in Unity Catalog that brings a lot of goodness. The 3-level namespace is important, as are tags, grant-based access, and a column mass function. We talked on those a little bit. Azure DevOps, we've also talked about. You want to do CI/CD across things using an automated approach. Whenever you're dealing with stuff, you want to think about what are those things that I have to organize. And when you look at them, there's a nice little graph on the right side that shows you what they look like. But there's also, what's the catalog for? So you're organizing stuff in your catalogs. What's it for? Is it software development or is it for data workloads? Where did it come from? So is it from a source system or is it the product of transformations? And then what have you done to it yet? So and that speaks to the medallion architecture of bronze, silver, gold. And then what is it? So it typically has a name. So here's an example of a 3-level namespace segregating things where catalog is made up of source and environment. Then schema contains the zone, the source and the subsource, if there is one, and then the asset's name, which might map to the example below. But understand that after you move over into that silver layer, so you've done source to bronze, bronze to silver, once you're into that level, you're going to change your organizational approach and shift it to by data domain or product that you're creating. And that basically means you're changing these 2 things at the end in schema, most likely. Again, you may have a different approach, but think about it, be conscious about it, make it a conscious decision. The pre-prod environment and prod, this is where your actual data is. And you likely are going to, as I talked about before, you potentially are storing data in the clear here because you may be relying on Unity Catalog and nothing can circumvent it because you don't give anything else access to that storage location. And the point of your pre-production environment is to make sure that you can put what's there into production. You're going to test it out, make sure your CI/CD is working, do a little bit of validation and smoke testing. In your synthetic environments, that's going to be your dev and QA/SIT environments. This is likely going to be made up with synthetic data, and the purpose of this environment is to do your data engineering activities that are necessary to perform data engineering. And this is making sure that when you go into QA, what you're testing is, can this really work? And does it work correctly? And putting it all together, you have a dev environment on the left side that is synthetic. You have DevOps tying it all together. Ideally, all this is using the same Active Directory and Unity Catalog. So that you've got different catalogs based upon the actual environments, potentially sharing some catalogs across them, depending upon what it is. In this case, and in most cases, automation is your friend. You want to leverage it. You may stick them together and actually take it out a little further so that you have synthetic plus a traditional 3-tier environment. This will work if you've got good CI/CD. If you don't do this. Recommendation, use synthetic in your lower environments, encrypt or anonymize in QA. It's up to you. If you leave the synthetic data in the clear in the production, you may just use audit and terminate the employee. That may be the approach you want to utilize. UC brings lots of stuff to this solution, including fine-grained control through using tags, and ABAC is an important element of that. Attribute-based access control, released this in 2024's Data Summit. Coolness that you'll want to take a look at. 3-level namespace as well, centralized governance, and cross-environment catalog access. So with that, thank you for listening. If you have questions, let me know. I'm sure everybody has an opinion. Take a look at my white paper. It's a good read. I spent a lot of time on it. Please skim it, if nothing else. Thank you. Have a great day. Talk with you later.